You are Locked On Hawks Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
To the Locked On Hawks Postcast, your home for the best Atlanta Hawks talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me is NBA and college basketball analyst DeShaun Tate. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. And of course, the Locked On Hawks Postcast is also part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So close call, but the Hawks woke up just in time. We'll discuss, and I think he's ready for his starting role. We'll download on that, but first, let's talk takes on the Hawks handing the Pacers a second straight L with the 124-118 win tonight. And Tate, you said the Hawks got their payback from the free throw line.
They did, Tenitra, and I think that, ultimately what I mean by that in terms of referencing that is, really getting a sense of Indiana putting themselves in position where I think they came out a little bit more physical than not only that they did in the first game. I think in the first game they realized that was something that they probably should have tried to do, at least if not nothing else, but they never really got around to that. And after the first half of basketball, they came out in the second half trying to do trying to try something new, which is to have that, bully ball physical mentality that they bring with them. And obviously that gets them into some trouble because where some of that maybe wasn't being caught as much, it certainly was more during the critical moments and key possessions down the stretch of the game. Yeah. And that's what got them in trouble because, typical situations, you probably figure, well, it's a little bit more likely not only that we can play that brand of basketball, but we can afford to put the Atlanta Hawks on the free throw line because we know that they won't convert. Well, this time, finally, right, that we get a chance to say, when I'm looking at this and I'm like, 95% from the free throw line, that's got to be somebody's about to get fired. Like, that can't possibly be right. That has to be a misprint. Right. And by the way, that one free throw that they missed happened to come at the very end where it just made the most sense for Trey Young to miss that free throw so that time can expire, not giving Indiana a chance to get a shot off and extend the game. So congratulations to the Atlanta Hawks on finally listening to our postcast, Tenitra, and doing something that I feel like they should have been doing all this time. I know it's easier said than done from when you're doing it, when I'm just watching from the lazy boy, but it was good to be able to see them knock down the free ones tonight.
Yeah, I got to agree with you. And we're able to have this conversation 2 game nights in a row. Right. 77% from the free throw line tonight, 78% from the free throw line a couple nights ago. But you said it best. 77% of anything or 78% of anything from the charity stripe is just basic, middling, average, except we know that the Hawks have struggled there for whatever reason for the better part of this second half of the season. And in games like this, where you are up 20 points and a team comes back to take a 1-point lead, and you kind of saw that the Pacers were getting a lot of the calls, if we're being honest, and the Hawks weren't. It's like, hey, but when you get a call, you're going to have to capitalize on this, especially because we had a guy in, I'll call him the random role player who didn't play Thursday night, but came back to bite the Hawks in the butt tonight was Benedict Mathurin.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. And so when you think about that, it's like, okay, well, he really made it tough on it was a situation where we kind of looked at it and said, okay, at the end of the day, this might be a problem for the Hawks. Granted, no Tyrese Halliburton, so there's that. We do preface by saying that, but we also go back to the games earlier in the season where, hey, they didn't have Tyrese Halliburton, Hawks were just fine. But for that said, I think the point that I really want to make is just you never kind of knew, like, where is it going to come from with this Pacers team? You kind of, and we'll talk about that in a second too. But Aaron Nesmith had 21 points, if I got that right. And you kind of look at that piece, and then we'll talk a little bit about what we saw later in the game. And you kind of knew, to your earlier point, that it was going to come down to something just like what we saw, right? And at the end of the day, that's exactly what happened. And I think it was encouraging for me because we know that when a game starts to tighten up, because a team is actually starting to hit their threes,
Right.
And we know how much the Hawks have struggled from the three-point line, just as much as they struggle from the charity stripe.
That's right.
It got a little bit tricky. It got a little bit scary in that fourth quarter, but I do like the resilience that the Hawks showed in the one space where we kind of knew that it could be a little dicey. It could be a little tricky for them. So I kind of want to congratulate them in overcoming, if I might say, the random role player.
Sure.
And by the way, guys, it's 120 to 118 tonight. It was 124 to 118 2 nights ago. But guess what? W and a W. So that's all that matters at the end of the day for these Hawks. But I'll tell you, one of the things that impressed me, and DeShaun, I knew this was going to make you smile when we talked about it pre-production, because sometimes he's kind of like the unsung hero, because we've spent a lot of time talking about Dyson Daniels and about the new players who the Hawks acquired at the trade deadline, right? We've spent a lot of time talking about those guys of late. And even another guy who we're going to talk about in the third segment. So you guys hang out and hang around for that. But
please do.
Trey Young gets lost in the shuffle. I know that probably sounds crazy, but for real, sometimes he gets lost in the shuffle because of some of the heroics that we've seen from a Dyson Daniels, surprisingly for us this season, a pleasant surprise, or from the guys acquired at the trade deadline. Again, a pleasant surprise, or an uptick in some of the players whom we've been hoping, hey, when are we going to kind of see you round into form? So for me, my take was Trey Young tonight was so important. He had 10 points and an assist in that first 4 minutes, but I felt like in spite of it all, in spite of the way the game tightened up at the end, I felt like he really set the tone for the Hawks, because that was a 39-19 quarter. So that set the tone to say, hey, we don't want to get into a track meet with you guys.
Right.
We do have the ability to get into a track meet if we need to. And then, of course, 26 points, 3 dimes at halftime. But this was the thing that really made me have that take of Trey Young is so important. He went down with a left quad contusion, right? And that's when you kind of started to see the Hawks, I don't want to say fall apart, but unravel a bit. Will be nice to say unravel a bit. But then he toughed it out and he went down. And when you saw that left quad contusion, it was scary because he tried to get up and then he went back down, and then it's off to the locker room and you don't know what's going to happen. 2 things happened, DeShaun. One thing is he got back in the game. And then another thing in the fourth quarter, he was about to take a break. And then that game was turning on a dime. Trey Young came right back in. You got to give him credit for toughing it out like that. And then for dominating the fourth quarter when the Hawks needed him most, because he accounted for 64% of the offense. So yeah, 10 points in the quarter, but 3 assists and 6 points created off the assists. So as much as it probably sounds cliche, or it may sound like Captain Obvious, sometimes we got to remember just how important Trey Young really is.
And he's so important, and I think that most people feel like, oh, well, that's, just the obvious thing. But when you have a person who not only is the, primary guy responsible for when it comes down to making sure that he's getting his points, because we know that that's something that we need, but also making sure that, the other guys get theirs as well. When you're that point guard, you are that traffic light telling everybody over here when to go, telling everybody over there when to stop, being that, I guess, traffic instructor that you typically see, police officers and so forth, whenever a light goes out on a main street, kind of directing the traffic and telling everybody. And not only that, but just still having to know exactly what the strengths and weaknesses are of every single player, where they like their spots. Remember, he's still learning a lot of that, not just about the new guys, but again, like I always mention, about some of his own starters, not just the 3 newbies, but about guys like Gay, about guys like Risa Shea. Probably was still learning to a degree with someone like a Jalen Johnson during the time that he was available. So, or
even in Onyeka Okongwu, because for a long time
he's not used to being in this position.
Unit. Exactly.
So it's still so many things you really got to learn on the fly. I think another thing with Trey is that he garners so much attention, right? And especially after that first quarter where he scored, I think 11 of the team's 15 points. They knew that they had to really try and dial in on Trey Young to find a way to be able to get this win. But it was good to see him, after sustaining that injury, to come back out onto the floor and still being able to find a way to will his team to a win. I'm gonna ask you just one last question, Tenitra. Maybe this isn't something that can be answered at this very moment. I'm kind of curious to know what has changed about his game, because for such a long long time from game one all the way to game whatever it was. We saw him, and it kind of looked like he was deferring a lot. It just appears like he wasn't really looking for his shot so much, and they were still able to impact the game and being able to win that way. We haven't seen that style of play as much lately
because you don't have to
as
anymore.
we did from Trey Young. Yeah.
I think you saw it in the beginning because you had to see it in the beginning. I think it was a combination of needing to show his teammates that he trusted them, but also needing them to show him that they were trustworthy. And sometimes that takes time. And then once you know, okay, this is how Dyson's going to play. This is how Onyeka is going to play when he's in the starting role or the starting lineup. This is how Zach Sachet plays. Once you start learning how they operate and you see things coming together, then you can go back to being the true you, meaning I can take over a game at will, scoring, not just assisting. And I think that there was something he did even tonight that shows and gives him a world of credit on that continuing maturity. The Pacers thought, oh yeah, he's a little hobbled, so we're going to go ahead and start trapping. Okay. Yep. We know the team.
You do that.
Yeah, exactly. Do that and let's see how it works. It worked to the tune of 10 points that he scored on his own and being responsible for another 6 in that quarter. So that's a maturity level because now he's thinking and seeing the game a little bit differently to be able to say, oh, I've seen this before. I know how this works, and I know how to get out of it and get my team to a W in spite of that being one of those things that teams had employed even a season ago that kind of had Trey in a position where he couldn't get himself out of that bind, and then he couldn't get the Hawks out of the bind, but matured in his play, maturing in his decision-making, and that's a big part of why you saw the Hawks be able to close out tonight. Speaking of close, it was a close call, but the Hawks woke up just in time. We'll talk about that in the turning point when we return. This episode of our Locked On Hawks Postcast is brought to you by Prize Picks. Basketball season is heating up down the stretch. Everybody's got about 17 or 18 more games left, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's easy to use, available in over 30 states, and lets you mix and match projections across different sports. So you can build lineups like, for example, you might want to take a Trey Young because he dropped 36 points tonight, but on the same token, you might want to mix it up and maybe switch it over to a Benedict Mathurin only because he dropped 30 tonight. But you can do that with Prize Picks because you can build your own lineups across teams, and then it's quick and easy because Prize Picks makes it simple to set up your lineup in less than 60 seconds, and then you can stay engaged all game long. So download that app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Might as well have some fun with it for the last 17 or 18 games of the regular season. With Prize Picks, you can run your game.
Time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
So Tate, at the 7:06 mark in the fourth quarter, the Pacers took a lead. Pascal Siakam assisted to Thomas Bryant, and there we are with a 1-point Pacers lead. But for me, that was really the turning point for the Hawks because right after that play, very next possession, Siakam, offensive foul, turnover, personal foul. Trey Young then capitalizes and hits the driving layup. Hawks go back up. Then Bryant, offensive foul, turnover, shooting foul. Now, granted, the Pacers did take another 1-point lead, but I felt like at that point, the Hawks understood the assignment and they understood, oh, this is about to be a dogfight. Like, yeah, we were up 20 plus points, but this is about to be a dogfight for the rest of this game, and we're here for it. And that's why I felt like that was the turning point, because I felt like the Hawks woke up and understood, oh, okay, I see where you're going with this. And you alluded to it, DeShaun, in that first segment, how you saw in that second half, the Pacers kind of building up the bully ball. It felt like midway through the fourth quarter, the Hawks finally figured out, oh, okay, they're going to try to bully us out of this game. And I feel like that was why they were able to withstand that storm and ultimately close out this game and get a win.
For sure. And there was a lot of that. I think that they kind of upped the physicality a little bit. I think once they realized that Atlanta started making some adjustments by
Yes.
kind of shifting its defense up closer to beyond the 3-point line to
Yes.
prevent, Indiana not only from being able to be a threat from three, but to get out and run. Because as we can remember, going back to last year, and I get it, there's no Tyrese Halliburton, whatever, what have you, this time around, this time around. But in comparison to last year, that was a lot of what, ignited a lot of the spark in the run to get guys around him more comfortable and confident by, filling in the gaps on the wings and being able to get much easier baskets where they don't have to work for them nearly as hard. But the adjustments that, Atlanta made on the defensive end early to prevent that is something that I think kind of frustrated Indiana a little bit and put them in position where they was like, okay, well, we know if now we're going to try and win this game. Not only do we not have our best player in Halliburton, but even more so, we don't have our, backup point guard, essentially, because now that Halliburton is out, you got to move somebody else up into that starting space, which is Nembhard. But who do you have coming off the bench? Now you don't have someone else who is that leader and veteran presence like a TJ McConnell, who I think is one of the better backup point guards that there is. So when everybody for Indiana's shots are just really not falling, they're trying to scrape and scratch and claw and do any and every single thing that they can, fighting, I call it tooth and toenail, to try and do anything that they can to be able to keep it competitive with Atlanta, who had already went up by 20. That was their saving grace, was to try and push Atlanta around a little bit, until Atlanta gets to a point where they say, you know what, we're just not going to be pushed around. And I think that's why we ended up seeing the game conclude the way that it did. It was all up to Atlanta, just making sure that they were hitting those free throws. And because they were, I think that they knew that Indiana couldn't beat them at that point.
Yeah, and I like you saying that, like they knew, okay, it's in our hands. So this was their game. Even after blowing a double-digit lead, it was still the Hawks' game to lose, win or lose. And I feel like the same, like they really, really were up for the challenge, and they understood it's going to be one with sort of like for lack of a better term, like a I don't want to say hack a shack, but hack a somebody.
Hack a hawk. Hack a hawk.
Hack a hawk, if you will. And listen, I got to go back and give them their flowers, right? Because sometimes sometimes technology is not your friend. So I'm looking down the stat line and I'm like, wait a minute. Let me give the Hawks their credit for 95% shooting from that darn free throw line versus the 77%. So Hawks and Hawks fans, forgive me, because literally my screen was not refreshing fast enough from the game 2 nights ago. But 95% is so amazing to talk about, again, from a team that did shoot in like the 77% area, not just a couple nights ago, but we've had talks in the last couple of weeks where they've been shooting from the free throw line in like the 60s.
Yeah, 50s even. I think one game they finished at like 53%.
Yes.
Far too often, Tenitra, to the point where when they did shoot like they did the other night in the 70-something percentile, that felt like they had been shooting 95% the way that they did tonight.
Yes.
So to see that, kind of happen the way it was, I don't know what they did different. I don't know if they had something different for breakfast. I don't know if they workout regimen change. Whatever you did to be able to knock down 95% tonight, then keep on doing exactly that, because that's something that, in a game like this, where again, this isn't a game where the Hawks happen to just, blow out their opponent. This was another one of those ones where I hope that I hope this conversation is being held at some point to say, you know what, the margin of victory, 2 points, was so close that had you not hit all of those free throws that you did, this could very easily be a loss.
Yeah,
this could be
we've had that
outcome for so many of the other games previous. Yes. I'm just glad that they're learning. Sometimes it's better late than never, I guess.
Oh, absolutely, because we are talking about a very tight stretch for the Hawks these next 17 or so games. And when we look at the fact that many times in the last couple of weeks, you and I have literally gone into the box score and we've said the Hawks lost by 6, the Hawks missed 7 free throws, or the Hawks missed 8 free throws. And it's very frustrating because when you can line it up like that, it's just very frustrating. But it's exciting when you're on the other side and you can line it up and say, okay, 95% is what actually got you the win.
And if anybody out there that maybe joins us, and appreciate everybody that, joins the program and listens to the show, unless Tenitra has some extra time on her hands, I would be really interested to know the last time that the Atlanta Hawks shot 95% from the free throw line. I'm gonna put some of our very gratefully appreciated listeners and viewers and watchers of the program, give them a little bit of a homework assignment, because that right there is something I'd be really, really curious to find out when is the last time they did such a thing.
Yeah, if you can do that, trust and believe, we will shout you out. Because I know our guys, our listeners are smart, so and our audience is smart, so they'll probably get it back to us. But yeah, we'll be looking forward to it so we can shout you out. But speaking of shouting out, Dyson Daniels, who turns 22 on St. Patrick's Day, is the third youngest player in NBA history to 175 plus steals and 40 plus blocks in a season, behind LeBron James and Magic Johnson. So that's what you'll be talking about.
This is what you'll be talking about.
DeShaun, what can you say about Dyson Daniels? You have this conversation after every game, advocating for him to be a strong contender, if not the top contender for Defensive Player of the Year. And for me, it was kind of eye-opening. Not the steals, 175 plus steals. That didn't do it for me. It was the 40 plus blocks, because I then look at the box score, his stat line for tonight, right? And I'm like, okay, it's right along, it's lockstep into what he's quietly been doing all season. And I think sometimes we get a little bit hung up, and not in a bad way, by the way, but a little bit hung up on the steals. But yeah, when I start looking at the stat line and I'm like, wait a minute, 10 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, and 5 steals, and no blocks tonight per se, but in just about every game, we're having a conversation about him having a block. And then it hit me when I saw that. I was like, oh, that's why he's sitting behind only LeBron James and Magic.
No doubt.
Because this guy is truly doing it in every way at both ends of the court.
Let me just say this real quick, Tenitra, because our people clearly are really on top of things, and the turnaround time is very fast. Thank you to Robert, who was able to chime in with us. And, yeah, it had to be Robert. If nobody else, I'm like, it's gonna be Robert. It has to be Robert. Yeah, for sure. 2016, the last time.
Man,
that's quite some time. Almost 10 years. Almost 10 years. Crazy to even think that, but I'm glad that they were able to do that on tonight to secure this victory. But even more so, I'll say that when we're talking about a guy like Dyson Daniels, you start talking about the steals leader and things like that, how impressive that is. That's great. Already being in the same conversation of anything. I don't care if it's,
free throws,
minutes, or just
free throw percentage, or
whatever. Anytime you're in the same conversation with LeBron James and Magic Johnson, you're doing something right. But even more so, we talk about the steals. One thing that surprised you is we was talking about the blocks.
Yeah.
I think that there's another part of this that I think just doesn't garner enough attention sometimes, but we hear it mentioned a lot, but I'm not sure if people understand really how impactful it is the deflections piece is another part of that, because not everything is going to be a steal, but sometimes just being able to be a disruptor. Sometimes just being able to be a person that can alter shots, maybe not even block a shot, but just alter and make a guy change in the air, his, shifting themselves, torquing his body in a particular way to make it more difficult for him to be able to convert on that shot. I think all of those things make a difference. And I've been saying it just because you can see the impact I was rubbing off on other people as well, making other guys want to step up and play defense. I think that it has helped Zachary Risachet a lot. I don't think it's a question that it's helped Trey Young at all. I I think that it's multiple guys. And even for some of the guys who are just coming on to the team, I think it's give it some time for it to rub off on some of those guys as well. So that's some of the reason behind why I've gone out to say the things that I've said about Dyson Daniels. I mean, it's just been phenomenal. Unfortunately, Atlanta Hawks, whether it's the team, whether it's the market, whether it's the record, or whether it's just the whatever, right? People are not going to pay attention as much as they would if it was the Celtics, Lakers, or whomever, whatever. Mark my words. People are, I don't know if you're sleeping under a rock or what's going on. Got to be paying attention to Dyson Daniels because his ability to play defense on the ball, defender, I take a lot of pride just where I grow up in the region I grew up and the way we view basketball. That defensive side of the ball is something that's one of those things that just doesn't cut. You have to want to play defense. So much technique and other things go into that, but you got to have that passionate. Be that passion, especially, and excuse me for getting long-winded, but you got to have that passion about being a person who in a world or generation or an era where it's so much about scoring all the time, to be that player that's willing to take the back seat for somebody else in that category and say, that guy right there, he's the best player on their team every single night, no matter what team it is. I want to check that guy and shut him down. And he did that. Big props to him.
Yeah. And to put his dominance in perspective, 4 players have 4+ steals this season in multiple games. Now, Asir Thompson, De'Aaron Fox, Chris Dunn, they've done it in 8 games this season. Dyson Daniels has done that 22 times. Let that sink in, good people. Now, Double O, he was dominant and double good too tonight. We will discuss. This episode of our Locked On Hawks Postcast is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. Now, for those who love using FanDuel's live betting feature, it's because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. So whether they're backing a team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3, never feel like you missed a chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. So right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports book betting partner of the NBA.
This is the Locked On Player of the Game.
So 17 was a walking double-double tonight, and that's why Onyeka Okongwu is our player of the game. Onyeka Okongwu had not 1, not 2, not 3, but 17 rebounds tonight. I mean, Onyeka was crazy good and also had 16 points on the night, but there was no rebound more important for him than that final one. Hawks with the ball up 1 with a little over 11 seconds left in this game. And it's just amazing to see. It almost feels like he's growing game by game in front of our very eyes. But yeah, Onyeka Okongwu with a heck of a game tonight. And wait a minute, don't let me shortchange my guy, because in addition to the points and the rebounds and having the double-double, it was the fact that he actually had a couple of assists. So, we're getting our little ball handling skills together. And he had 3 steals. And what you mentioned as well, it wasn't just the steals, but there were a couple of plays where he even had some deflections because he was paying attention and moving into the play in the passing lane in just enough time. And of course, he had 3 blocks tonight as well. So yes, Okongwu, player of the game.
I love what I've seen out of Okongwu, and I'm always, I'm all about, I guess the cool kids now are calling it keeping the same energy, if they're still calling it that. I don't know. I got to ask my nieces and nephews, because it appears that whenever I think I'm the cool uncle and say things, it's never the word dated. Of the day anymore.
They've moved on.
So for now, we're going to use keeping the same energy. I'm going to keep the same energy by, definitely expressing some of my doubts that I had about Onyeka Okongwu, particularly in the starting lineup right now. I do agree that, after, what are we talking about now? Probably 22 games as a starter. He's averaged 14 points a game, 9 rebounds, shooting 62% from the field.
Yeah.
Of course, that's coming into the game on tonight. So
Sure.
I think anytime somebody has that kind of consecutive reps, then inevitably you only get better, but definitely don't want to take anything away from him for actually doing that, because he's looked like a starter as well, and just seeing some of the contribution that he's brought. And yes, of course, some scoring around the basket, when we know, or at least I personally feel, I'll just speak for myself with my own opinion, not really a guy that can go out there and get a bucket. Doesn't really have the unique or creative ways on the offensive end to be able to go to get a bucket. But not everything, the way his game is developing, is looking like, oh, on the receiving end of a Trey Young, lob, feels like anybody can do that. But I'm watching also step out to the outside and hit some shots from perimeter from time to time, some mid-range jump shots as well. Sometimes a pump fake and put it on the floor and take it into the basket. Even from an assist standpoint, a few games I've seen that he's able to find some wide open guys where I'm like, was that Trey Young that passed that? And it's like, no, that was Onyeka Okongwu. And I'm like, wait, whoa, really? Like, so, so it's be able to good to see that. And then the last thing I'll say is, it doesn't just stop there on the offensive end. Even on the defensive end, I'm seeing him look better. I'm not saying he's going out there and can be this defensive stopper or anchor on any point guard, but even guys that are smaller than he is, quicker than he is, I think he's learning how to defend some of those guys. Much better defensive player on the perimeter now that we're seeing him in a starting role than we were prior to.
Yeah, and I know he's not the traditional big, if you will. He's maybe slight of size for what you would want in a 5, but he is becoming the new traditional big in his versatility, all of which you've just mentioned. So I think that of something that we said a couple of nights ago when we heard from Jalen Johnson for the first time, and then several games ago, you posed this question. So I want to circle back to that as we wrap up. But we talked about Jalen Johnson and just the excitement that we have for what he's going to bring when he comes back healthy next season to that front court for these Atlanta Hawks. But I think that the Hawks Nation might want to get a little excited about what the whole front court is potentially going to bring. Because if you look at what Zachary Reese-Shea is continuing to do, he's been so consistently getting better and better. And then you marry that to what we're seeing in Onyeka Okongwu, that might make for a nice little front court for the Hawks next season. And I think that if nothing else, going into, and of course, we're moving a couple months down the road, but going into the offseason, going into free agency, this might be the first time where the Hawks have to say, unless they get some all world or some world beater center that's available to them, they might have their guy.
Yeah, I can see that. And I think that that's good for them, because it brings, not contrast of styles, but just brings a little bit of balance, because we see somebody like a Jalen Johnson, who's more of like the point forward type, the athleticism, the play above the rim type of player, where Onyeka is not nearly as much of that, but he can still bring impact, right, to the game in different ways that Jalen Johnson. Sometimes I feel like it's easier to neutralize guys that play similar positions but yet still play similar styles. It's difficult to prepare for teams in the opposition when they play different styles. Obviously, Zachary Reese-Shea, he's different from both of those guys too. He's not necessarily just a above the rim type of player, but his mobility of being able to, defend guys that are smaller than he is, being a guy that's, going to give some of those backdoor cuts all night long, and being able to, there's elite ability to be able to move without the basketball. And don't forget, I mean, somebody else who maybe not, nothing to go right home to mom about or anything like that, but you can see his game starting to really kind of develop, and getting used to seeing him in a Hawks uniform for the first time this year, was Nance as well. He was also a guy in the front court that I think was able to kind of do some different things and give a different look. Three-point shooting looked a lot better than we've ever seen it in his NBA career, not just an above, the rim type of player either. So I think it's just good to be able to throw different teams off with just different ways of being able to play. Even in some instances, maybe not all, but in some instances, we saw some different things out of David Roddy too. So I just think it's really good still to have a different type of skill set at the top positions in the front court.
Agreed. Locked On Sports Atlanta is the #1 place to hang out after every game. Remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And for more on the Hawks, check out Locked On Hawks with our guy, Brad Rowland. We'll see you next time.